In 1847, a young doctor made a discovery so simple, so obvious, that it should have saved millions of lives overnight. Instead, it destroyed his career. His colleagues mocked him. They had him dragged from his hospital in chains, and eventually they locked him in an asylum where guards beat him to death. His crime? He told them to wash their hands. Vienna, 1846. The city was the medical capital of Europe, and at its heart stood the Vienna General Hospital, a cathedral of science where the brightest minds in medicine came to train. But inside this hospital, something was killing women, and nobody could figure out why. The hospital had two maternity clinics. In the first clinic, run by doctors and medical students, 1 in every 10 women who gave birth would die within days. Their deaths were violent, raging fevers, putrid flesh, unbearable pain. The doctors called it childbed fever. But in the second clinic, run only by midwives, the death rate was less than half. Same hospital, same city, same air. So what was the difference? Enter Ignaz Semmelweis. He was 28 years old, Hungarian-born, and had just been appointed assistant to the director of the maternity ward. He was brilliant, obsessive, and, by the standards of Vienna's medical elite, an outsider. And he was about to ask a question that would ruin his life. Semmelweis did something almost no one else had bothered to do. He counted. He tracked every death, every birth, every variable he could think of. Were the women in the first clinic poorer? No. They came from the same population. Was it the ventilation? He checked. The diet? He checked. The position of the beds? He checked. Nothing explained the gap. Then, in March of 1847, something happened. A close friend and mentor of Semmelweis, another doctor, died suddenly after accidentally cutting himself during an autopsy. The symptoms were identical to childbed fever, and Semmelweis saw the connection. The doctors in the first clinic were performing autopsies every morning, cutting open corpses to study disease, and then walking straight into the maternity ward to deliver babies, without washing their hands, without changing their coats, sometimes with the same instruments. They were carrying invisible death on their fingertips. The midwives in the second clinic never performed autopsies. They never touched corpses, and their patients lived. Semmelweis ordered every doctor and student in the first clinic to wash their hands in a solution of chlorinated lime, a chemical used to remove the smell of decay before entering the ward. Within months, the death rate in the first clinic collapsed. From nearly 1 in 5 women dying to less than 1 in 50, he had found the cure, and it cost almost nothing. But instead of celebration, Semmelweis faced something worse than disease. He faced ego. The medical establishment of Vienna was outraged. These were the most respected doctors in Europe. And this young Hungarian was telling them, publicly, that they were killing their own patients, that their hands were dirty, that everything they believed about medicine was wrong. They called him a fraud, a zealot. They said he was insulting the dignity of the profession. In 1850, after years of fighting, Semmelweis was dismissed from the hospital. He returned to Budapest, humiliated, and spent the next 18 years writing increasingly angry letters to anyone who would listen. Letters that were ignored, then mocked, then forgotten. So what was actually happening on those unwashed hands? Today, we know the answer. But in Semmelweis's time, germ theory didn't exist. The idea that invisible living organisms could cause disease was considered absurd. Most doctors still believed in miasma, the theory that disease came from bad air or imbalance of the body's humors. What Semmelweis had discovered, without knowing the mechanism, was bacterial infection, specifically streptococcal bacteria, which thrive in decaying tissue. When doctors carried these bacteria from autopsy tables to birthing beds, they were essentially inoculating healthy women with deadly pathogens. A 2013 review in the European Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology confirmed that Semmelweis's chlorinated lime solution was, in fact, highly effective at destroying the streptococcal bacteria responsible for puerperal fever, even though he had no idea bacteria existed. The tragedy is that hand washing is now the single most effective infection control measure in modern medicine. The World Health Organization estimates that proper hand hygiene alone prevents hundreds of thousands of deaths every year in hospitals worldwide. Semmelweis was right. He was just 20 years too early. In 1865, at the age of 47, Ignaz Semmelweis was lured to a mental institution under false pretenses. When he realized what was happening, he tried to leave. The guards beat him. They strapped him into a straitjacket. He died 2 weeks later, not from madness, but from a gangrenous wound inflicted by his own restraints. He never lived to see his vindication. Just a few years after his death, Louis Pasteur would prove the existence of germs. Joseph Lister would introduce antiseptic surgery, and the entire medical world would finally understand what Semmelweis had been screaming into the void. Today, every time a doctor scrubs in before surgery, every time a nurse sanitizes before touching a patient, every time you wash your hands before a meal, you're completing the work of a man who died in an asylum because he told the truth too soon. And here's the part that should haunt us. We still don't listen enough.